We thank each one of our speakers, and we now ask Dr. Victor Mendoza to come forward. Victor Mendoza holds a doctorate, a PhD in physics, and he has taught thermodynamics of the atmosphere in the National Autonomous University of Mexico. He is a doctor and tutor and advisor in postgraduate studies in earth sciences, oceanography, and geography at this same university. Among his lines of research, we have simulation and prediction of anomalies in temperature in the Pacific and the Atlantic, and especially the Gulf of Mexico, monthly and seasonal forecast of temperature and rainfall in the Northern Hemisphere, with special emphasis on Mexico, simulation and forecast of thermal and hydrological balance in the watersheds of Mexico, and their application in determining vulnerability of water resources in light of climate change, global climate change. Victor, you are recognized. Thank you so very much for this invitation to speak on a topic that is linked to long-term forecast, to attempt to forecast drought and thus attempt to mitigate the disastrous effects and results of these. I have seen over this morning's sessions the interest that there is in quantifying drought in an appropriate manner. And of course, this is very useful to us. We work theoretically, primarily, in trying to contribute to something that will assist us in mitigating the effects of drought. I believe that the forecast on drought might be useful at a given point, very useful to know that a drought might arise. And I think that this is important information for us to have. Now, we have already spoken here of quantifying drought with different indexes. The definition of drought has already been given, and here we have another very basic one. It means a deficit that is significant in the availability of water due to precipitation that is lower than average or normal. And here we have these drought indexes with the greatest resolution that can be requested, seasonal and monthly, and we have several other indexes here. We have the percentage of normal precipitation, ppm. In our group, we use this figure a lot to quantify and assess our forecasts, and this other index of standardized precipitation that we have also used, and this that has been spoken of throughout the morning, and that is the Drought Monitor of North America, has already been mentioned. It is a monthly indicator, a compound monthly indicator of drought for Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and basically include these three indexes: hydrological drought, meteorological drought, and agricultural drought. 2011, and I will speak a little bit more about this, it was an exceptionally dry year. And the very interesting paper that was presented before me, it would appear that this is an effect that comes about very quickly because of conditions in the Pacific, but as our speaker said, it can force us to look at the effect that comes forcefully from the ocean. And this is where I will be paying closer attention this afternoon. This is the Drought Monitor for May-June 2011, and it comes from the north, probably because of this peak that is established and inhibits the entrance of humidity or moisture to Mexico, and drought is like a wind trap, traps the wind that takes moisture to Mexico. Drought continues throughout the rainy season. Here we have August through October. And this is what's already been presented, the percentage of areas affected by drought. In Mexico, there is a seasonal aspect to it. It's primarily occurring in the rainy season, during the rainy months, from May through October. And this is the pattern of anomalies in surface sea temperature for April 2011, the month prior to the rainy season in Mexico. This is one of the fields that we use as a component to model and be able to forecast probable drought events in the northern hemisphere, and particularly so in Mexico. What we have noted here is a very interesting fact. There is a negative anomaly that's very important and significant that begins in Ecuador and moves to both hemispheres, moves to the coast of North and South America, accompanied by a vast pattern of positive and very strong anomalies. And this is like powdered gold, because these are very strong anomalies, and to us this is worth its weight in gold, because it gives us a way of determining the variables and allows us to model the atmosphere in the long term. Now, we are not part of this curse. We're no longer being cursed by not being able to forecast because you don't have the initial conditions that are perfect and ideally suited to do this. Otherwise, we might be condemned. But there is an ingredient, the ocean, that is going to allow us to aspire to carrying out long-term forecast and find these forced manners of the determining information on the atmosphere that could provide some help regarding drought. This is the seasonal correlation between May and October, average sea surface, and the PDO. And it's this pattern, the classic pattern of the PDO, and these are correlated figures. But imagine for a moment that these are temperature anomalies for the surface of the sea. And what we see here are positive anomalies, similar to El Nino, and below that we have the negative ones below the below the Aleutian Islands in the central North Pacific, a little bit more towards the Asian coast and towards Japan, and that is what characterizes the index for the PDO, a positive index. It is the warm phase of the oscillation of the PDO that we are looking at. This phase lasts some 30 years, and then it's inverted. And what we would see here then would be the same pattern, but with the opposite sign. It would be positive anomalies where it's negative, and negative where it stands as positive. So the entire period would comprise 60 years, more or less, a very long period. Now, in turn, this is the ratio between the surface sea level temperature and the PDO. If we look at the Atlantic now, and we understand these to be temperature anomalies, we would have positive anomalies for the temperature that correspond to the warm or positive phase of this PDO, and the negative phase would be the same but inverted, with inverted figures. This PDO has longer duration, and it is more from in the range of 40 to 50 years. And these are the phases that I was able to build up from the PDO index, primarily from the May through October rainy season in Mexico. It's a register ranging from 1900 to the present time. And here we have a warm phase, a cool phase that begins more or less in 1944, in which the index is basically negative. There are a few interruptions where it goes into zero and then the sign is inverted, and that is when El Niño appears during that phase. This phase is essentially plagued with the phenomenon of Niña and cooling in the equatorial Pacific, which ranges from the Peruvian coast to the international timeline. And here we have the positive phase again, once again interrupted, such as in the cool phase, or in this case by Niñas. This is a phase that is full of niños. There are more niños in the cool phase. It would appear that 2008 and 2009 shows the beginning of a new phase, a cool phase in the PDO. This is the multivariate ENSO index for summer, particularly for the summer, and that's where I was talking about El Niño. And here we have the cool PDO, and this is from 1950 to 2004. The cool and warm PDO divided by this vertical line, and you can note that there are positive indexes in the warm PDO for ENSO and in the cool PDO. Now, here we have an overlap of the PDO index and the AMO index. Here we can see the variation, the degree of variation over a longer period of time for AMO and PDO. And in particular, between 1940 through 1975, where we had the cool phase of PDO superimposing on the warm AMO phase and the cool AMO phase. So to a certain degree, we have these two oscillations and their overlap that might be linked to drought in North America, and particularly so in the north of Mexico. These could be forces in the long term, drivers in the long term, and one might expect in coming years a great number of dry summers in Mexico. That's what we are looking at in future. This is the correlation, the seasonal correlation for rainfall from May to October with AMO above and PDO on the bottom of the slide. If the AMO index is positive, that entails rainfall above average, and if the seasonal correlation is positive, then the opposite will take place when the index is negative. If the PDO is positive, that leads to rainfall above average when seasonal correlation is positive, and the opposite occurs when the index is negative.
Estos son unos pronósticos.
These are some forecasts that very recently we have carried out, where we are asking for information from the Meteorological Service in 152 points of the model and its network in Mexico, where we need information from the Meteorological Service on precipitation and temperature. This was carried out by UNAM almost to interpolate the meteorological data into the appropriate points on the network to assess the variability of the model. And here we see the percentage that corresponds to the fact that this model might forecast above or below or close to average. The period here is a 62 period from 1948 to 2009. The PDO that I showed you earlier, and the ability of the model above this probability, statistical probability, encompasses an area of 60.6% of the country. What we have essentially found is that the model forecasts drought in Mexico, and this is the field of forecast of the model that is doing better than just probability. Now, here we have the case of when the positive phase is separated. Here we have more niños, and the area grows from the forecast and grows to a higher figure, and in the case of niñas, probability increases to 72%. With this, I conclude that it's very important to be able to aspire to forecasting with a degree of certainty to forecast drought, because this will allow us to take proper steps. If you say to decision makers, look, we hope with a degree of probability that next summer may be a dry summer, we think that's what's going to happen, then if measures are taken, the best thing we can do is to prevent and take measures. If it rains, well, so be it. Our problems are gone. But measures have been taken, preventive measures. I think forecast is very important. It's something that we have to do, and that is why data is so important. Once again, what they have said here is excellent. We need to have good coverage of data throughout the entire country, good information, and this trend where we see data going down into a black hole, we have to stop this, because data is being lost, and if data isn't even gathered, then there's nothing that we can do. We have to revert this black hole in information that seems to be arising so that we can forecast drought indexes and determine what we can do regarding forecasts for future. Thank you very much. Now, in order to begin with our Q&A session, I would ask the panelists to please come back to the head table. Now, please submit your questions in writing so we may begin right away. Let me tell you a little bit of my own perceptions regarding the presentations we have heard. In the case of Arturo, I would underscore that what he has said about the multiplicity, the numerous networks, and that this poses a problem in access to information. And not only he, but all the panelists have talked about the loss of ability to monitor because these stations are dropping in number. In the case of Carlos Dobler, it's very interesting to hear of this incipient project. We start to dream about what we can add and take away to this project that he has in his hands. But I would underscore from Carlos Dobler's presentation the need for a network to measure humidity or moisture in the soil, as well as being able to identify what can be added and what value we can add to this work regarding the need to define an independent variable that will allow us to calibrate the index. Concerning what Luis Brito so amply discussed, he talked about the relationship of anomalies that occur in droughts, and once again he talked about the need to stop losing these monitoring stations. And something that I think is of the utmost importance is the proposal to create a center for assimilation of climate data, or compiling climate data. This is something very important that we can take from the seminar. And Victor Mendoza gave us a glimpse of the relations that there are between sea surface temperature and precursors for drought. And he talked also about the need to have good data coverage and to revert, not just interrupt or stop losing, but to revert the loss of these climate stations. Very well, let's move directly into the Q&A. I have a question for Carlos Enrique Dobler from Germán from the city of Guanajuato. Who or which institutions outside of SIAP take part in the development of this index that you discussed? Primarily, we have been in touch with consulting from the National Drought Mitigation Center in Nebraska, and here in Mexico with the National Meteorological Service. Another one for Carlos. Teresa Cavazos. In the United States, there is a soil moisture measuring tool and information. Have you tried to use this? Perhaps it would be worth your while to attempt it. No, we have not attempted it. I didn't know that it existed. Arturo Quintanar, Alma's question. Who are these stations, climate stations, that no longer generate data dependent on or under whose responsibility? Federal government, state government? My suggestion would be to try to implement a program, adopt a climate station. Yes, I think that might happen, like our telethon here in Mexico. Perhaps we could do something similar to that. Very interesting question, because what we have found is that several of the stations that we had talked about, some were closed down in 2009, and we didn't know if that was when it actually did end. And we asked, what's going on here? What is the service doing as concerns if they have any intent to reactivate these stations? And we don't really have an answer to this question. Quite likely, What's going on is that, quite simply, they're abandoned. They're just left. And I think that I need to go and find out the answer to that question.
Yes, do you know anything else on this? Let me say something on this. Yes, since 1990, the Hydraulic Engineering Review here in Mexico published a special issue that's about 4 or 5 different stories or articles there, where researchers of the country were asked, the national university and other institutions, they were asked to contribute with elements on this problem of hydrology in Mexico, and a lot of those questions are answered there, and among the answers is that basically the budget is the main problem. People retire, especially observers, people retire, and there's no one to replace them. The problem is there are no positions that are opening, new positions, I mean, and sometimes the father inherits, as an observer, inherits the son, the continuity of the observations, but not all the time, and there's really no way to be able to cover the new positions. So this is what's done in literature, and really this is a serious problem, because it's the situation is not just putting this, the station is maintaining it, and for it to be able to stay there a reasonable time. That's the problem. Thank you. Once more for Arturo Quintanar, Herman Sanchez of Guanajuato, you have the floor. What is, according to you, the harmonization and the use of the stations? Is it public policy, lack of methodology, or no schemes, or what is the next step? Yes, I believe that there's a reason for there is, I mean, data are not being shared. So each organization uses their own data on the way they know how to do it, because what we have seen is that at the level of the data that you see in Excel, where they're completely different in all their forms and everything. So I think the next thing would be what we've already heard. This is harmonize all those formats and create a center to gather all this information that is harmonized with quality control and everything that's necessary to be able to make scientific use of all this data. Well, thank you. Yes. Just a comment. Alma Navarro, this is of Art and Culture, yes. At the Autonomous University of Mexico, they have a special certificate on government policy intervention. Do we need an intervention of researchers or specialists with the government or society at large? Would this be a challenge? I think the challenge is to break away from the tradition we have. Until now, we've been characterized by being a little bit alien from these things. We have the business community on one side and then scientific researchers on the other. And this is something we've discussed in recent years. INEGI is promoting. We already have this modality. Until now, they are giving us information for articles and things, and something that we're promoting is granting incentives to researchers that are really entrepreneurs, that are creating partnerships with industrialists. I think the problem here is to change attitude, to overcome those cultural obstacles we sometimes have. I think that's where it all starts. Yes, at the end I have a general question. And Ruben Ramirez of UNAM, what effects would this have, and how can we speed up rainfall in certain regions? What is the cost of this, and what is the geographic area where this can be done? Accelerate rainfall, you mean? Is that the word they used? Yes, yes. How to accelerate rainfall? How can you create rainfall or something like that, I guess? Yes. How can you make it rain? That's, yes, that's what they're, yeah, that is a cloud with something of silver. He said this is very controversial. I think we have like 30 years or 40 years of sowing clouds since the 40s, and I've heard Howdy and some other researchers who said, for instance, that the only thing that has happened is that they've redistributed rain. That's what they've done. At least in Colorado, we have seen that they are sowing clouds with orographic elements. There you do get more rain, of course, more than normal. But where you don't have that situation, as in Mexico, for instance, it's more difficult. I also understand there's a project in the dry areas in Sonora, in Nuevo León. Russians came to ionize the atmosphere like an umbrella or something without any fabric, and then electric current, and the atmosphere is ionized to create nuclei of condensation. But I don't know if that worked. I really don't know. If it is really very difficult to be able to quantify whether it was going to rain or not, right? Very well. Thank you so much. Any more questions, anyone? Comments, questions, doubts, anything from the audience? Yes. Please, with a microphone. A microphone. Sorry. No microphone. I can't hear. For renewable energy. So we could coordinate efforts like that with what we already have, and we're going to be investing millions of pesos, even geophysics here. This is one of the institutes that's representing this effort. So we could perhaps invite them to participate in this type of with this type of invitation. Yes, anything?
Israel Vázquez Morán de la
Vázquez Morán.
Yo como comentario también
Just a comment,
una propuesta
a proposal
para controlar las sequías.
for drought control. A polymer has been developed. So this polymer allows for water insertion to use in crops and for the agriculture sector. And it could revert this effect. In going back to data collection that has been mentioned in different fora, the problem comes from the institutional agreement in the Congress here in Mexico, since the Disaster Commission is assigned to congressmen that have no other political task. So they're given this participation in the Disaster Commission, but they have nothing else to do. So this is an issue that definitely, as a country, we should attend to it from that institution, from Congress, as a priority to start with. So there's been no budget for the stations of monitoring. And the climate situation, we have other needs. Where is the solar energy diagnosis? Where is the diagnosis of eolic energy? Why don't we have any important data for the country? Why not? Because we don't have any stations that are really monitoring our eolic potential or solar potential. We say there's a lot of sun in Mexico, a lot of wind, and that's it. But we cannot really create basic engineering. We're not creating basic engineering to be able to implement all those things. Secondly, something we've also discussed here, why we haven't continued gathering information. A good part of those stations, because of federal agreement, they're under the custody of the states and municipalities, but this has been a great failure because a lot of those stations, for instance, are in the municipal presidency, at the mayor's office of the town, and they disappear. Those are the first ones. No one really cares for those stations. They have completely disappeared. So this is a problem. I think it's an institutional problem, and they are blaming just one entity. But I think we're all part of the problem, and we should all be part of the solution. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, may I? Yes. What possibilities are there for INEGI, which is already an institute that is already compiling information and that is doing so many things, for INEGI to become this collection center on climate information that we need so much for the monitoring process? Well, yes, of course, we're saying this morning on the possibility of this, and this is a great proposal. And as we said this morning, yes, and we believe it's also important for us to define for this information to be nationwide information, for it to be protected and supported with all the opportunities of the national information system for climate conditions. And of course, ITs in our times also allows maybe not the physical possibility, but even the non-physical possibility for us to do it through servers virtually. And the important thing is for us to, first of all, honor the standardization we have, for all of us to get information in the similar manner, for all of us to have the same databases and the same infrastructure in the same fields for us to facilitate things. And I think that would be the only way for us to make it easier on all of us. Yes, I have another question. Since there's interest of INEGI as well, the question would be, what mechanisms can we follow so that this becomes a reality, so this idea, this proposal, can really materialize, bear fruit? What should we do? What do we have to do for that to happen? Yes? Let me answer this. The mechanism that I'm proposing would be, this is something that we've even mentioned with the meteorological service, a single database rather, and a standardization document that allows us to reach this point. So I propose a meeting, you and us, and those of you that are interested here in the audience, under the light of this group of discussion, for us to be able to move forward on this. Yes, thank you. Yes, good afternoon. Ramiro Leonardo of the Geography School of UAM. In terms of what was said in a previous workshop, there was one of my colleagues of the Environment Secretariat in Michoacan said that they're having problems with the canyons because an avocado grower has, I don't know how many of those canyons, and there's no standards for the canyons, and they are no good for rainfall production. They're having a lot of problems, as a matter of fact. Political issues also are causing many problems there. And in Guadalajara, another study was made, and practically this is obsolete technology. It doesn't work anymore. It's obsolete. Mexico's using it, but it's really a unnecessary expense that Mexico's making. Yes, the last intervention, please. Good afternoon. I'm Gabriela Suarez of National Water Commission. I believe that a very serious problem we have is the budget granted to the different agencies. And I was in surface water, and for the monitoring, we don't have enough resources, and we don't have money for maintenance. The networks are not working. They're not modernized. I think something that would really help would be unifying efforts, joining efforts in the different agencies, and perhaps divide our work, and you say, well, you're going to be in charge of this and I will be in charge of that. So with the collaboration of everything, there's a lot of selfishness in terms of information. People want to keep their own information. They don't want to share it because they just want to use it for their own benefit. And just asking for information, and no one sends the information. They send limited amounts of information, and they send information that's not completed. I believe that we should be getting together to reach some type of agreement for Mexico to start moving forward. This is for everyone. This is not just one agency or an individual. This is just a comment. Thank you. Very well. Finally, thank you. I want to thank the panelists for their valuable participation. Would you please join me? A round of applause, giving them this token of our recognition and appreciation. Thank you so much for your excellent presentation, Mr. Brito Castillo. Thank you. Arturo Quintanar and Carlos Enrique Dobler Morales. Thank you so much. And thank you. Thank you so much. We will continue the seminar tomorrow at 9 a.m. See you tomorrow. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.